Do I go first? Okay. Hi. Hi, I'm Mason Yoon, and it's a great honor to be a respondent to the fantastic three presentations of this session. I really appreciate your insightful speeches. And Professor, I'll just read from the script I have prepared. And Professor Baisheris has introduced the quantitative linguistics as discipline that enables us to explore the universal properties of languages and communication, whether among humans or across species. Or if you don't like the word universal, it seemed to me it's a kind of the system of communication as a whole. And as a scholar of English literature who often works with the particularities of language use, I found it both delightfully surprising and highly illuminating to encounter such an approach that seeks to reveal a latent, long-standing concern of the humanities, the quest for universality in communication. And because actually I'm not trained in linguistics and do not know the details of the discipline of the quantitative linguistics, what drew my attention most from the perspective of digital literary studies was its potential applicability to stylometry, and especially the recent concern in distinguishing between human writing and AI-generated writing. In your discussion of how AI-generated writing might be distinguished from human writing or a video, I was led to wonder actually whether such a distinction would involve considering that each large language model has its own latent universal structure from which diverse outputs emerge according to prompting or tuning. So it's more like sort of a theoretical curiosity rather than the questions about the details. So if so, I would be interested to hear whether you also envisage a kind of a universal structure that extends across models, and actually these sort of modeling would help, and how actually these modeling would this modeling help to distinguish the difference between the human writings and the AI-generated writings? And I think this naturally leads to my question to Dr. Sprout instead of Dr. Zhang. Dr. Sprout's introduction to the fantastic realm of constructed language is actually reminded of the time when I wrote an exchange diary with a close friend of mine, with the secretly coded letters and rules between ourselves. It seems an unquestionably valid and exciting approach to explore the LLM's linguistic capability with asking them make conlangs and thereby investigate the characteristics of human languages. And according to your approach in the experiment, which makes the conlangs according to different types of languages, different families of languages, and the conclusion marked by your sort of final line, actually, it was not shown at the presentation, but according to the slides you gave us beforehand, you said sort of Chomsky was not right in saying, in talking about sort of the universality of languages. So it's a kind of a different sort of approach to the languages. So it seems we already have from your part an answer to the question I just asked Professor Baisheris, that you seem to say that there are no common tendencies or language patterns among different LLMs, perhaps. So you also seem to suggest that even the linguistic knowledges differ from model to model, if I understand rightly. Then my question is whether actually if LLMs were to learn from or about these linguistic knowledges, not just about sort of how to generate or sort of imitating human languages, then do you think their generative capabilities might be improved with these linguistic knowledges? And would the multilingual knowledges in the sense contribute to revealing another dimension of a sort of a regularity or universality worth thinking about in relation to Professor Baisheris' approach? these are my questions to the fantastic linguist. And actually, I'm not not an expert in linguistics, so these questions may sound too sort of broad, but still, I think, I'm really curious about these aspects. And okay, now this is the question to Dr. Zhang. I think actually I was sort of called to be here as a respondent to Zhang initially because I'm a literary scholar. And Professor Zhang has shown how stylometric analysis can illuminate the shifts in literary style and possibly theme and genre across Alfred Tennyson's long creative career. And working with both R and Python and employing widely used tools and methods, you presented clear stylistic distinctions that align with the poet's evolving interests and periods. It was both surprising and reassuring to see how sort of neatly the clustering and PCA visualizations corresponded to our sort of conventional understanding of Tennyson's two different phases. So my question arises from this very correspondence, but actually, because I didn't have the slides which sort of showed your interpretations, so my question is actually my questions already sort of have the answers from your presentations today, but still I'll just read the questions first, and then let's just make it sort of more into the detailed questions. And do you think the clustering might also reveal nuances that go beyond what we already know, something that complicates or refines our sense of Tennyson's stylistic evolution? Yeah, and I know that you answered that the sort of middle period is a kind of a very strange the period. And you mentioned that your broader aim was to connect the stylistic change with the shifting intellectual and cultural climate. So actually, could you elaborate on what your results might suggest about that relationship? I mean, the shifting intellectual and cultural relationships to the specific aspect of Tennyson's evolution of the style. And this question also extends to the results drawn from the syntactic complexity matrix, which show that sentence length and the use of subordinates increase as Tennyson's style becomes more mature. So a notable exception appears in the mean dependency distance, which particularly interests me. And actually, yeah, you already provided the answer. And I was wondering, I could see sort of this very characteristic aspect from the slides you have provided that the middle period shows a sort of strange sort of estrangement from the tendency we thought of. So could you explain why the middle period shows a shorter distance between tokens and their dependent words than the early period? So while other indicators of a complexity point in the opposite direction, and this feature seems to suggest something distinctive. And could the shorter this dependency distance be closely related to the finding that lexical diversity is greater in the middle period than in the early or late phases? Yeah, sort of you have already said it, but anyway, it would be really helpful if you sort of give us some more explanations. And again, actually, this might be the real question. And could it also have something to do with the genres Tennyson explored through the poem In Memoriam? And how might this pattern invite reflection on the broader cultural or intellectual influences shaping his poetic languages, which seems to be your actual sort of ambition in doing this digital humanities approach to understanding the Victorian poetry. So this is my questions. And then I also wonder whether you find any possibility or idea of further stylistic tools or frameworks that could help advance such an understanding, especially because we are witnessing the rise of deep learning and LLMs. And it would be fascinating if you could illustrate this point with a few poetic lines, perhaps guiding us briefly into Tennyson's world. Thank you. This is it.
네, 안녕하세요. 저 경북대학교 국어국문학과 정성훈입니다. 아, 네. 저희 돼요. 저희 드리면 될 것 같아요. 네, 제가 한국어로 토론을 해서 여러분들께서 좀 불편하신 것 같은데, 네. 저는 제 전공이 언어학이고요. 그 다음에 그 전산언어학, 아까 첫 번째 발표에서도 나왔지만 계량언어학 전공을 했기 때문에 이 자리에 불러주신 게 아닌가 싶습니다. 그래서 이 논문 3편을 제가 지난주 토요일 날 받아보고 열심히 공부했습니다. 반갑기도 하고 제 분야이기도 해서 열심히 읽었고 공부도 열심히 했고 저도 많이 공부가 된 것 같습니다. 그래서 이 자리에서 제가 느꼈던 점하고 그다음에 궁금한 점들을 같이 나누고 같이 공부했으면 좋겠다는 생각으로 토론문을 많이 작성했는데요. 배고프시죠? 예. 빨리 질문을 드리고 답변을 드리는 것으로 하겠습니다. 첫 번째 발표를 제가 들으면서 많은 생각을 했고요. 이게 사실 핵심은 뒤에 앞에도 많은 걸 설명하셨지만 뒤에 이제 표절 문제를 좀 많이 얘기하신 것 같아요. 결론부터 말씀드리면 사실은 최근에 챗GPT나 이런 것들이 많이 발전하면서 이 문제들이 사실은 발전하면서 생긴 문제죠. 예전에는 너무도 확연했던 구별이 되는 문제였는데 요새는 이제 구별이 안 되기 시작하면서 나타난 문제 같아요. 그런데 아까 이 뒤에 번역을 보면서 아직은 조금 괜찮구나, 구별이 되겠구나 싶었던 게 그 퀀터테이티브 링귀스틱스를 양적 언어학이라고 이렇게 번역하더라고요. AI가 번역한 겁니다. 저희 쪽에서는 계량 언어학이라고 하거든요. 그러니까 그런 걸 보면 단어로서 아직까지는 이렇게 포착할 수 있을 것 같아요. 그런데 실제로 이제 점점 이제 AI가 발전되면서 구별이 안 되기 시작하고 게다가 이제 하이브리드 그러니까 그 컴퓨터가 번역한 걸 인간이 다시 조금 가공을 하기 시작하면 더더욱 이제 포착해내기 어려울 것 같아요. 그러면서 이게 어떤 언어학적 특징으로 이런 걸 잘 포착해낼 수 있을까를 좀 고민해 봤고요. 반대로요. 점점 그러니까 그 디텍팅하는 능력, 그러니까 기술들이 발전되면서 거꾸로 생각해 봤습니다. 어떻게 하면 안 걸릴 수 있을까? 그런 점들이 어떤 점들이 있을까? 혹시 그런 것들에 대해서 조금 의견이 있으시면 좀 말씀해 주셨으면 좋겠고요. 또 하나 이제 제가 한 분당 두 개씩 질문을 조금 생각해 봤었거든요. 또 하나는 제가 이제 그 인문학도로서 계량 언어학을 공부했고 전산 언어학을 공부했기 때문에 이제 또 저희가 이제 디지털 인문학이라는 학문을 좀 하고 있다 보니까 이제 계량 언어학이 사실은 중요하다고 말씀해 주신 것 같은데, 그리고 랩도 이제 계량 언어학 중심의 이제 랩이셨잖아요. 수학자, 물리학자, 언어학식 다 모여 있는. 이제 전체 이제 인문학을 할 때 저희가 그러면 이제 계량 언어학 혹은 또 크게 보면 언어학이 디지털 인문학에서 어떤 도움을 줄 수 있을까? 어떤 기여를 할 수 있을까? 거꾸로 디지털 인문학으로 언어학이 어떤 도움을 받을 수 있을까? 좀 이렇게 좀 너무 거대하지만 좀 그런 생각들을 해봐서 여기에 대한 그 의견이 있으시면 조금 말씀해 주셨으면 좋겠습니다. 그리고 이제 두 번째 발표도요. 제가 사실 문학도는 아니거든요. 제가 언어학 계속 학부 때부터 언어학을 공부했기 때문에 그 문학을 전문적으로 공부해 보진 않았는데, 제가 최근에 그 한시 자료를 가지고 좀 연구를 하고 있습니다. 그래서 시 관련해서 조금 도움이 될 부분도 있고 해서 열심히 공부해 봤는데요. 제가 사실은 준비했던 질문이 제가 처음에 발표문을 받았을 때는 아까 보신 것처럼 덴드로그램이나 표만 계속 받았어요. 그리고 이제 결론 부분이나 이렇게 그런 간략한 요약본을 받아가지고 첫 번째 질문이 그 덴드로그램이나 이런 거 그렸을 때 상위 100개의 빈도들을 단어를 좀 제시해 주시고 설명해 주셨으면 했는데, 사실 앞에서 다 설명을 보완해 주셔가지고 설명해 주셔가지고 그 발표하시면서 제가 갑자기 질문을 하나 만들어냈습니다. 그게 뭐냐면 아까 그 PCA 분석을 하셨잖아요. 이게 그러니까 차원이 많은 걸 2차원이나 3차원으로 축소해서 간략하게 보여주는 시각화 분석인데, 보셨을지 모르겠지만 밑에 그 PCA X축이 17%, 18% 왔다 갔다 하고요. Y축이 7%, 8% 왔다 갔다 하거든요. 결국 그러면 1차원과 2차원이 그 전체 시의 한 20% 정도만 설명하고 있는 거예요. 물론 그 20%로 초기, 중기, 후기를 거의 잘 구별하셨지만 나머지 설명되지 않는 80%가 있다는 거거든요. 그 나머지 설명되지 않은 것들은 뭐라고 생각하시는지 좀 궁금했고요. 그 다음에 두 번째 질문도 좀 너무 간단한 질문이긴 한데요. 그 제가 한시를 분석하거나 뭐 이럴 때 보면 이제 아까 센텐스하고 토큰이라는 개념을 쓰셨는데 센텐스라는 게 사실 좀 너무 쉬운 개념이면서도 사실 분석할 때는 어려울 수 있거든요. 예를 들면 한국어 같은 경우에 철수는 집에 갔어, 밥을 먹었어 라고 말했어 라고 하면 사실은 이게 한 문장으로 처리될지 집에 갔어, 밥을 먹었어라는 안에 있는 퀘테이션 마크 안에 있는 그 문장 두 개가 따로 해석될지가 사실은 그 어떤 기준으로 삼을지가 굉장히 조금 중요해지거든요. 여기에 대한 답은 물론 아직까지는 저도 못 찾긴 했는데 처리하실 때는 어떻게 처리하셨는지 혹은 어떤 방법이 앞으로 조금 더 개선돼야 될지 좀 이런 것들도 좀 궁금했고 마찬가지로 토큰도 그렇거든요. 이 토큰이 이제 한국어를 처리할 때 토큰하고 영어를 처리할 때 토큰들이 다르고 이 토큰들을 어떤 기준으로 이제 처리하셨는지가 궁금했고 이게 사실 그리고 시라는 장르잖아요. 사실은 문장이라는 개념보다는 행과 연이라는 개념이 조금 중요할 수 있습니다. 라임이나 뭐 이런 것들이 있어서 그래서 문장으로 분석하셨을 때는 혹시나 그 연으로 이렇게 문장이 안 끝났지만 이렇게 연으로 해서 한번 분석해 보셨는지도 그런 아이디어가 있으셨는지 혹은 해보셨는지 조금 궁금해서 그것도 한번 여쭤봅니다. 그리고 마지막으로 그 스트로트 선생님께 한번 질문을 드려보고 싶은데요. 이것 들으면서 저는 한국 분들은 다 아실 텐데 아스날 연대기 드라마가 생각이 났어요. 거기에 네안타러라고 혹시 들어보셨을까요? 요새 그 언어가 어떻게 그러니까 여기서는 이제 그 포노테스틱이라고 해서 여기가 음소 배열론이라고 언어학에서는 번역하거든요. 그거는 어떻게 했냐면 한국어 어조를 그냥 반대로 그러니까 그 자음모음을 반대로 배열하는 거예요. 그래서 문이라고 하면 미음, 우, 니은을 니은, 우, 미음, num으로 그냥 발음하는 약간 그런 식의 패턴을 조작해서 했던 거로 알고 있거든요. 그러니까 그런 거를 좀 생각해 보면 이게 참 재미있는 연구가 되겠다 싶었습니다. 그리고 그래서 좀 질문을 좀 드리면 사실은 쿠란어라는 새로운 언어를 만드시면서 이제 음소 배열 쪽으로는 일본어, 그다음에 통사적으로는 그 카리브해 언어라고 제가 찾아보니까 나오더라고요. 히슈카리아너어를 가지고 오셨고, 그다음에 정서법, 철자법으로는 끼릴문자를 하셨는데 사실 일본어는 이제 고저 악센트가 있는 언어예요. 그래서 자음모음이 번갈아 가는 가장 간단한 패턴입니다. 그 음소 배열론 쪽으로 보면. 발음이 굉장히 단순해지죠. 그리고 그 히슈카리아너 같은 경우에는 사실 OVS 언어여서요. 어순으로 보면 굉장히 희귀한 언어예요. 그러니까 전 세계 언어가 한 5,000개에서 6,000개라고 그냥 좀 좁게 생각해 보면 SOV나 SVO 언어가 거의 한 70%, 80%를 차지하거든요. 대부분의 인간의 언어들이 그런 식으로 작동하고 있는데 이건 사실은 좀 빈도가 낮은 혹은 나타나기 어려운 어순이기도 한데 이런 걸 이제 선택하셔서 하나는 너무 간단한 배열이고 하나는 좀 복잡한 통사적으로 조금 어려운 배열을 결합해서 독특한 언어를 만드셨는데 그런 이유가 혹시 있으셨는지 이게 언어 유형적으로 좀 재밌는 부분이어서 한번 말씀드리고요. 또 하나는 마지막 좀 큰 질문일 수도 있는데요. 이러한 그 연구들이 이제 그 언어학에서도 언어 유형론이라는 게 있거든요. 언어 유형론이나 혹은 뭐 기계 번역, 그다음에 대규모 LLM이죠. 대규모 언어 모델에서 어떻게 더 이제 좀 기여를 할 수 있는지 조금 이렇게 구체적으로 좀 말씀해 주셨으면 좋겠다고 생각을 했습니다. 네, 제 토론은 여기까지로 하겠습니다. 감사합니다.
Before we start to hearing the answers from presenters, we only have 10 minutes and we have another session will be going on. So please allow me to say that like each presenter will have a 3 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, I will try to be brief. So if I can condense your questions into one single question, I would say having models, general models for all languages can help to distinguish AI-generated text from human-generated text. That would be correct to condense your questions into that single question. Well, very briefly, those models are old. I mean, they didn't appear with computers. Zipf's laws, which are probably the oldest mathematical models of language, appear when the computers didn't exist at all. He computed by hand with lots of people helping him. So my question would be, the models probably do not help to distinguish text. Models maybe help to distinguish a communication system, a feasible communication system from an unfeasible communication system. Why do I say that? Because there are papers which prove that laws like Zipf's laws and similar laws are not random. They appear for a reason. If you generate a text with random words, Zipf's laws do not emerge. So it means that it says something underneath a human language. But the thing is that large language models copy this very well. So these models alone cannot distinguish. What can distinguish text of both origins are things like the work of my colleague here, in which you take a bunch of stilometric metrics and you use machine learning methods to distinguish things. So the features are the many stilometric measures that we have, and then you apply sophisticated machine learning models to distinguish between them all. And as for the other colleague, I think he's asked two questions. The first question would be, how can I avoid to get caught, if I'm correct? The second is how humanities and computer scientists can interact. What can we expect one from each other? So as for the first question, my answer would be, don't do that. Don't copy. Don't use AI to generate text. Use it to write a text in a more correct form, to have some words which may sound better, text which can be more idiomatic, but do not try to generate text, because but I cannot answer your question, because we have methods to detect language generated by LLM methods, by systems. But as I tried to explain in my presentation, interpreting them is very difficult, because you have a large array of measures, stilometric measures, and the combinatorics is very, very, very complicated. So I could not tell you, don't use sentences of this length with adjectives which go blah, blah. This I cannot say, because it's very complicated. But again, my advice is, don't do that, because we will get you. And finally, humanities and computer scientists. As I said, human researchers, from my point of view, they have the mission of interpreting and finding a meaning to the findings that we propose. So we say, this is a model. This is a law that appears all the time, or this is something that appears in our languages. I think that it's your job to interpret this model. We probably don't have the background necessary to do that. Vice versa, we would expect from you interesting questions. For instance, one interesting question which is being addressed now is, has the language of young people changed because of the emergence of Twitter and all those systems in which you use short sentences, etc., etc.? Does it imply that they have less vocabulary, that their syntax is simpler, in fact that their expressivity is not as good, they are not expressive as their parents used to be? That would be an interesting question, and in our field we are expecting this kind of questions. So that's it. I don't know if I answered both of you.
So yeah. Okay, thank you for your questions. That's insightful, and I'm proud of me to think more deeper about my project. Okay, so Tennyson has long been my favorite poet. That's why I chose Tennyson for this kind of digital analysis. And I said that my goal is twofold. Bridging the quantitative approach to the text with introducing the qualitative interpretation of the text. And I'm still working on, constructing that bridge between two kinds of analysis. And I have to work further on adding, my own qualitative, subjective interpretation to this digital analysis based on, previous studies. Traditional cross readings of Tennyson's poetry. Yeah, I'm still working on, creating my own, qualitative interpretations, and so how to conclude about the implications of this quantitative analysis. Digital analysis of Tennyson's texts, and also you asked about. What kinds of new insights I have gained from this analysis? I learned a lot in working on this project. One of the things is that, in memoriam, which is a great elegy for the death of the poet's close friend, Arthur Hallam, is actually neutral, relatively neutral, compared to other poems by Tennyson. Elegy tends to be very emotional, charged with grief and mourning. However, this poem is relatively neutral, objective, compared to other great poems by Tennyson. And the other insight I'd like to introduce is that, the epic poem, Idylls of the King, of course, are very complex and highly, intricate grammar structure than other previous poems. But actually, it's more repetitive in terms of lexical variety. So that's a new thing for me. And okay, and now I'd like to answer your questions. May I answer in Korean too? Okay, 예, 좀 질문이 한국어셔서 그 답변도 그냥 한국어로 하는 게 나을 것 같은데, 이제 PCA의 그 적용 문제에 대해서 말씀하셨는데 사실 그게 굉장히 큰 중요한 이슈거든요. 그러니까 그 MFW 100개, 이제 가장 많이 등장하는 단어 100개를 이제 PCA를 할 때, 그러면 그 데이터는 무려 100차원의 데이터거든요. 그거를 이제 뭐 한 2차원으로 그 줄이게 될 때, PC1과 PC2가 차지하는 그 퍼센티지가 낮을 수밖에 없게 되는 거예요. 그래서 뭐 제 연구에서는 뭐 PC1이 뭐 한 10% 후반, 20%는 넘지를 않았는데, 그러니까 사실 그 정도면 좀 높게 나온 거고요. 이제 그 선행 연구를 보면 10%도 안 되는 그런 경우들도 제가 봤어요. 그래서 그러니까 사실 이게 다른 학자들도 이미 뭐 연구를 했던 문제이고, 제가 알기로 이제 문학 작품을 이제 PCA를 할 때에는 그 PC1과 PC2가 차지하는 비율이 낮을 수밖에 없다라는 게 이제 그 학자들이 이제 내리는 결론이고, 그래서 이제 PCA를 그냥 단순하게 이제 문학 작품에 적용해서 해석을 하기는 좀 한계가 있다라는 거죠. 그러니까 PCA만 보고 그거를 이 문학 텍스트를 좀 해석하기는 어렵다라는 거예요. 그러니까 어디까지나 이제 PCA는 그 우리가 쓸 수 있는 방법 중에 하나인 거고 이제 여러 가지 이제 방법을 함께 이제 써야 되는 거죠. 그리고 그
네, 선생님 지금
예.
너무 죄송한데요.
오케이.
저희
예.
Okay, so I'll try to be as brief as possible. First of all, Professor Yoon's question. Just one note. When I said in the sort of preliminary version of the slide that Chomsky was not right, I wasn't particularly referring to his particular theories about language, but rather his completely dismissive attitude towards large language models, as saying they're basically useless and don't tell us anything. I think that's completely wrong. If I understood the question, the main question though was like, do I think we could somehow improve the generative capabilities of these models with linguistic? And I think the answer is we hope so. That obviously there's a large amount of interest in particular, not just in constructed languages, but also in dealing with real languages that are so-called low resource, under-resourced, or there just isn't enough data, probably never will be. So how do we get large language models to deal with those? And there's an active research area in trying to see, can we sort of inject linguistic knowledge into these systems so that they can actually cover these kinds of things. So I hope that sort of at least partly addressed your question. And Professor Jung's question, if I understood it, it was sort of, okay, so all of these linguistic properties are interesting, but why the distribution? Why does it occur? I mean, that's a very interesting question. It's a very deep question, and I can't hope to answer it here. I mean, people have asked, just to take word order, why is it that, SOV word order and then SVO word order are very common, but others are less common, and people have various theories about why this should be the case. None of them seem to me terribly convincing. They all often start with the presumption that there was an original word order, the Ur language that we all spoke when we were wherever we were when we studied invented language, had some word order. That seems to be very presumptuous. We don't know anything about this language, whether it had a fixed word order or not, and therefore to sort of start with that assumption and sort of evolve towards, particular word orders that we see in modern languages, who knows? I mean, so I think it's a very interesting question, but I'm afraid I don't think I can really answer the question at this point because it's really quite deep. And
thank you for your short and swift response. And this concludes our session 2. In fact, according to the schedule, we don't have break, but we will need to have break right now because everyone is getting tired. So we will have a 5-minute break, and then we will have a post session prepared by undergraduate student on digital humanities. So, yeah, here, yes. So that's it. Thank you very much for every participant in session 2.